Sweet. So, I'm Amy Calandrella. Thank you. I'm an operating engineer with Local 98 in Western Massachusetts. Operating engineers are the people who run the heavy iron on construction sites. So we do bulldozers, excavators, cranes, bobcats. If it's got a key and it's made of yellow iron, we make it. We run it. And before I get us started, I want to get a sense of who's in the room. So if you're a building trades worker, can you raise your hand or make some noise? Yeah. All right, I love you guys being up front. Thank you. Appreciate it. And then also, I just would love to see a show of hands if you and your union or organization have tried to work together with the building trades or currently are. Lovely. Bless you. Fabulous. So I got into the building trades 7 years ago. I was 28 years old. I was tired of being poor, and I wanted a stake in the fight. It was 2015. The IPCC had just put out some terrifying report. There was a bunch of big climate marches, particularly in New York City. And I said, well, this is going to be a shit show for the rest of my life. Where do I want to ride it out? And then where do I have the opportunity to have some influence? Yeah. And I had a lot of friends, going into activism work and education. And it looked saturated, like there were a lot of people going in that direction and that what needed to be handled was going to be handled. And so I said, Can I organize an interesting and effective life for myself on the part of the building trades? It looks like there's people here who are intelligent, who are dedicated and hardworking, and who have some of the key skills in guiding us through a transition to a livable planet. And those are people I want to know, and I want to know what they know. What does this look like from their perspective? And I haven't been wrong. I'm 7 years in now. I've worked on college campuses. I've worked in the woods. I've been on the top of a 200-foot tower crane building the MGM Casino in Springfield, Massachusetts. I don't run cranes, but I took care of it. So I've milled and paved on the highway at night. I've watched the sunrise over the Connecticut River every day in December on a 7-day job, capping some contaminant that came from the coal plant because we couldn't dredge it out. And so we covered it up with rocks, which is our best solution for a lot of things. I've been laid off on a Friday. I got laid off from that college job on a Friday, and by Saturday morning, my BA called me. This is how construction jobs work a lot of the times. We're hiring halls. It's like you're part of Charlie's Angels, and you get a phone call, and someone tells you what you're going to do. So I got a phone call Saturday morning. My BA says, hey, Amy, you're working on the railroad. Start Monday morning. You're going to show up in the bottom of Route 5. You're going to talk to Jimmy, and he'll tell you what to do. And then, 6:30 in the morning, I'm at the rail yard, and then by 9:30, I'm running a spike machine down the track, which I'd never seen before. So it's been a wild ride. Building trades workers, we're working 24/7 in every part of the land you can imagine, the cities and the towns and in rural areas. We build, we maintain all of our waste management systems, all of our energy systems, all of our transportation systems, everything that you see around us and all the things that you don't see. And we know what's rational about the systems we have and about what's not rational. We see it and we live it. So this is a constituency that you want involved in designing a response to the climate emergency. These are people, we're expert in uncertainty. We're expert in adverse conditions and figuring things out as we go along, in problem solving, and in working with limited resources. We're also experts in the failures of the class system because we live it every day, and our bodies are on the front lines of all of the pollution and all of the chemicals that are contributing to the climate crisis. And most of us, we spend all of our time outside. We we live it. So it's with excitement I want to present our panel of building trades workers. I organized this thinking particularly about people that have worked in the field or are currently working in the field, because we're in the trenches, we're there every day, and we're seeing it happen. And so I'm interested in getting our perspective on what we see, where we're headed, and then where we need help from our allies in other areas of the labor movement. So for starters, I wanted to ask the panelists, and we can start with Barbara and move this way. So what is it that you do for work currently? I should face you when I say this. What is it that you do for work currently? How long you been doing it, and what do you like most about it?
Okay, hi there. My ancestral name is Malneetsis. My English name is Barbara James. I come from Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. I am a fourth-year carpentry union apprentice with Local 1907. I'm also a trustee to our local and a delegate to our provincial council. I'm also a part-time instructor for the BC Institute of Technology. I expertise in high-performance building, getting tradespeople ready for net zero building. I have a whole list here. I do a lot of stuff.
Hell yeah!
I'm also part of the BC Tradeswomen's Society. I'm a director on the board, and we are a nonprofit. I'm also a Build Together director, and that's the Women of the BC Building Trades. I'm also a regional representative for the BC Centre for Women in the Trades, and a delegate to Tradeswomen Building Bridges.
Go ahead, Barbara.
All right.
What was that?
So what are you doing for work currently? What kind of jobs are you typically involved in, and what do you love about it?
Okay, so currently I'm a fourth-year apprentice, so I go back to school on Tuesday. I will be journeying out in November, which is pretty exciting. But all summer I've been working. We are building a new bridge. It's called the Patello Bridge in New Westminster. And so I'm a concrete form worker. And building a new bridge, then we'll tear down the old bridge. And that's what I do for the United Brotherhood of Carpenters. But that's no longer where my passion lays, because I have a connection to the land and carpentry. And the formwork, the concrete, as we all know, is not carbon friendly. So I got hired on by BCIT as an instructor for the high performance building, and I focus on teaching tradespeople how to build net zero, and looking at the materials we're using, like how much carbon was created in just making the materials itself and then getting it to site, and just being like building with intent. I think all tradespeople need to start thinking this way, because we can't build everything out of concrete. So that's where my passion is now. Specifically, I've been traveling to small Indigenous communities to teach these skills. And yeah, that's my favorite part of it.
Great.
My name is Emmett Doyle. I am also a fourth-year apprentice with the Carpenters in Local 68, which is in the Twin Cities. I have much fewer titles and positions. My main activity within the union in terms of activism is working with our apprentice committee to try to advocate for more green trainings. And then my other role in the labor movement is, I guess, the bard of the Twin Cities labor movement. I play a lot of picnics and stuff. So I've had a very diverse apprenticeship. I actually came to the building trades by a strange route. I majored in environmental studies in college, worked in the food nonprofits for a year or two, and found that I was mostly making rich people feel better about themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And I decided to not do that anymore because it made me sick to my stomach. And then I worked on the Mississippi River for about 4 years. We were trying to organize a union there. It got busted. And so after facing retaliation from that company and just the fact that the Mississippi River has like very 18th century work conditions, it's absolutely hellish. I decided to step up in life and do construction instead, which was a major improvement. Also, I was getting married at that time, so I figured, you know, might as well have a decent paying job and occasionally be able to see my partner. So I started out construction in weatherization, which is not a thing that the Carpenters Union does a lot of, but it's a really cool process. I don't know if you know what weatherization is, but it's basically upgrading existing buildings to be energy efficient. The Weatherization Assistance Program was started maybe back in the 70s or something. The federal government thought this was going to be like a couple-year program and that they would just be done updating all of the housing in America. And then as they did it, they realized that there's actually a lot of housing in America that needs to be updated. And in the process, discovered all these new things about building science and about insulation and about energy efficiency. So the WAP, yes, that is its acronym, has birthed, so to speak, a number of new advances in building science and efficient building over the years. However, you are only allowed to do that for 1 year because they don't want attorney people who only know how to do weatherization, because we don't have a lot of weatherization shops. So when that was done, I just began doing a whole bunch of diversity of things around the union. I've worked in prefabricated panel wall factories. I've done siding. I've done a bunch of scaffolding on bridges. Most recently this summer, I was doing concrete form work on bridges. And I'm pretty sure I'm laid off. I'm probably going to get a confirmation from my foreman like tomorrow about whether or not I have a job on Monday. I hope I don't, because I got stuff to do. I can get other work this winter. I got a pretty diverse skill set. And you know what I really like about construction is when you are building something that should be built, it's a really rewarding feeling. When you're building something that shouldn't be built, it sucks. Mm-hmm. In the wall factory, they were going to have us prefabricate a Bitcoin factory. That's one of the reasons I was like, I'm going to quit. I can't come to work and do that. But the really cool thing that I've found is that you have a job that's also a craft. And although the industry continuously tries to like de-skill us and break things down into like the most kind of Fordist methods of production, where you have this very like rote skill that you just do over and over again, they can't stop us from becoming skilled workers. And it's nice to have a craft that you can go home and build things of beauty and take pride in the things that you build. So I've taken all the earnings from this concrete job that was working us like 60, 65 hours a week and outfitted my basement wood shop with the things I need to build things that I can take joy in and bring joy to the lives of my friends and family. And I think that's very rewarding.
Awesome. And
hey everyone, my name is Celina Barron. I'm a journey level inside wireman with IBEW Local 11 Los Angeles.
yeah.
And so I'll just maybe take folks through what a day is like, right? I've been out of work for a little while, but for the most part, construction workers get up very early in the morning, right? We're talking 5, 6 a.m. starts. And we're on the freeway just blasting down, like going for it, right? Because we are often commuting very far. In Los Angeles specifically, many folks cannot afford to live in the neighborhoods in which they work, can't afford to live in the county in which they work. I'm very lucky that I get to live in Los Angeles County, that we afford to do so, but driving clear across the county sometimes in order to make it to work. Then you finally get there, right, and you're outside and it's in the dark, right? And hopefully there's lights, and there's supposed to be lights, but sometimes it's a gamble whether there's going to be lights, right? And the jobs change all the time, right? It's very regular. Our job is to work ourselves out of a job, right? Build something, move on to the next one. We're constantly working towards the layoff, right? So it's very, very regular. Like, we're like, like when we get laid off, when this is over, see you on the next one. And every day is a new challenge, a new thing, right? An engineer said it was supposed to be this way, and that's absolutely not like that. So we roll with the punches, make it happen, build a building. And then also, while we're all the building trades, sometimes we're not always friends with each other. So it'll be like some carpenter put something in the way. Someone left some equipment somewhere.
Someone got on the equipment they weren't supposed to.
So we're like frenemies sometimes, but we usually roll together also. And it's a long day, and it's punishing, and it's hard, and our bodies are our tools also, right? Sometimes you'll have friends that are like, hey, want to go do this cool thing, bungee jumping or whatever, rock climbing or something cool, right? And it's like, no, like, my body is my tool. I protect it with my life. Absolutely not. I'm not messing around. Like, if I fall, if I injure myself, frankly, if I work out too hard, it's not happening for me. I need to be able to get up and down a ladder full day all the time, right? My body is my tool. My hands are critically important to me, and carpal tunnel's very real for us. Like, it's a hard life, right? And we're often quite tired. And most of our job is ignoring our body and just trying to get through the day. And then finally the day is over and we just go home. And now there's traffic and we're grouchy about it. And for many of us, it's multiple hours trying to get home, right? So I think that also trying to organize folks who live that life is very, very hard. But it's not that we don't want to or that folks aren't into it. It's just a grueling, demanding space.
Thank you. And I just want to share, because not everybody knows sort of what some of these terms mean, is a union. Who knows what a union apprenticeship is in the building trades? Okay, good, a bunch of us. So for those that don't know, most of the building trades unions, they have apprenticeship programs, and they're schools, training schools funded by the members themselves. And so, $2.35 out of every hour that I work on the job goes towards my training and education fund, which funds our apprenticeship program. And I think all four of us came through the apprenticeship programs. It's an earn while you learn program. They're all structured differently. The way mine was is that I went to school on Wednesday nights and some Saturdays, 6 to 9 on Wednesdays and a couple Saturdays per month. And when I went to work, I'd make 60% of the journeyman wage. Right now, journeyman makes $7.37. When I started, I was making like 20 an hour, say. And so the contractor will take you on, say you're a green bean, you can't do much, but you're cheap. And so I'll take you. And they call it the other 4-year degree. You go to school and you're working at the same time, and it's a great opportunity that not a lot of people know about because the doors have been so closed to white men and family only in the building trades for so long that this information hasn't gotten out there. And so it's part of, I think, what a lot of us do here in this group is share information about the building trades apprenticeship programs, and also think about them as an organizing tool, because it's a way to bring in new members, and as people come in as apprentices, organize them into fighting union members. My second question for this group is, how do you see climate change affecting your life? And then how do you see your work contributing to climate change?
Start with me.
Yeah.
Affecting my life. Well, I don't know if you've heard much, but up in Canada, the federal government is trying to break treaty and build pipelines through our land. So that's how it affects my life and my people. And it's hard to organize within a union who builds those pipelines. So that's where I struggle, and those are the challenges I face with that, because apparently you can't be pro-union and anti-pipeline. News to me. So yeah, that's how it affects my life and my job. But I do, with the net zero building, like I said, I traveled to small Indigenous communities, and we did a pilot project recently that was for Indigenous women and the gender diverse community. And we partnered with the school that I instruct at, BCIT, the Aboriginal Housing Management Association, a contractor, B Collective Homes, the North Vancouver Outdoor School, and the Cheakamus Center, which is the outdoor school. And so what we did is, it was a hybrid project. We had, I think it was about 9 different women from across BC, Alberta, and Manitoba. And we met online and we taught them all the theory of what we do, of the high performance building. And then we met for a week in Squamish, British Columbia. And we retrofitted a panabode cabin. And we got it net zero ready. But the way we went about it is we spent the majority of our day teaching them how to properly install windows and doors, how to put on exterior insulation, how to focus on your air barrier. And then after, when we were done that practical work, we would go sit in the longhouse and we would listen to elders tell stories. We would drum, we would sing, we would go out and harvest Devil's Club, and we made a salve. And so we incorporated a lot of culture into the build, so that way you have the connection to the land that you're building on, so you're more likely to care about what you're doing. And it was really successful. I can plug a YouTube link to the project afterwards if you're interested.
Hell yeah.
But yeah, so that's my job on that end of it. And so that's the hope I see, aside from all the concrete stuff that I've done in the past.
Awesome, thank you.
Gosh. Yeah, in terms of how climate change affects construction workers, obviously we're working outside most of the time. We are about 6% of the workforce in the US, and from the period of 1992 to about 2016, construction workers made up 36% of heat-related deaths in the American workforce. This was primarily cement masons and roofers, and disproportionately Hispanic construction workers who tend to be on the non-union residential side. So it's literally a life and death situation for us. As heat waves become more intense and more common, the industry tends to fight tooth and nail against any kind of protections for workers against heat exposure. So it's going to be, a real fight. And unfortunately, when you get heat stroke or you get, heat exhaustion once or twice, you become more vulnerable to it in the future. It's a similar situation with frostbite, actually. So on both ends of the temperature spectrum, being harmed by exposure leads you vulnerable to further exposure. So it's going to be a recurring trauma to workers as we continue to get hotter and hotter. So, that's not ideal, and certainly our companies are not always great about giving us things like water or shade or a place to rest. Even if you try to get your body temperature down during the course of the day, you might go to your car to blast the air conditioning. You only have a 15-minute break or a 10-minute break. By the time you walk to your car, you might have a couple minutes where you're actually in your car, just grabbing a granola bar or something. And if your car has been baking all day, it's actually hotter inside the car than outside. And especially if we get these situations where it doesn't really cool down at night even. That's, really how people die in heat waves. So we're going to see fatalities, many fatalities, I think, in the construction industry as a result of heat-related deaths, and that's going to increase in the coming years unless we fight tooth and nail to get strong protections. And those strong protections are probably going to result in a lot slower building, because we're going to lose a lot of hours and a lot of days to having to stop for the heat if we have protections that actually protect us. And if we keep things on schedule, then people are going to die. And in terms of how our industry impacts the environment, it depends on kind of how you're counting it. I've heard figures from 11% all the way up to like over half of all emissions globally can be counted as kind of construction related, either directly from our activities, actually building, or from the embodied carbon in the materials that we use, especially concrete and steel, transport of those materials. And then, of course, the actual buildings that we build are often highly energy inefficient. The industry does not tend to gravitate towards building highly efficient buildings because those tend to be more expensive to build. And, there's that short-term profit motive. So yeah, overall, it's quite a dire situation. We're both, as an industry, driving a lot of climate change, and then also being driven down by a lot of climate change, often to our deaths.
Okay. So I think, well, first I'll just start off with, as an inside wireman, right, it's kind of like a misnomer. While we're often inside a building, the building's not built yet. Like, we're actively building it, right? So things
It's not
like,
inside.
yeah, right. So maybe we might be on a roof of the building that's being built, or we'll be in the basement of the building that's being built, or we'll be surrounding the building that's being built, or the thing, right? But it's generally not a space that's climate controlled. And I will say, without a doubt, glass or windows always go up right before the summer, right? Every time. And then, by and large, they'll decide to do something in the building that just makes it that much hotter, and it's just it's hot. It's hot, right? And heat stress is very real. And once you're impacted by it, that's it. That's the ball game for your life, really. You will continue to be impacted by it for the rest of your life. You're that much more susceptible, right? But also, there are like times where you'll be maybe at your hall and someone will be like, hey, they're trying to shut down this refinery, right? And we got to sign this form, otherwise they're going to shut it down and fill this out. And there's scare tactics, right? And people are afraid, and it is our livelihoods, right? So sign the form we will, until someone with a skosh more education, right, a little more awareness of what that means, might tell, if they're lucky, a group of apprentices or a group of people who don't know, hey, like, more regulations are more work for us, right? But it can be very scary out there, right? And so when you're just barely making it, and all this information is being thrown at you, and it's hot, sign the forms we may. And so that's, I feel like, how our jobs are impacted. And I would say, like, how we impact climate, there's a lot of waste in construction. There's a lot of waste, right? And you might get to the end of a job, and there might be a section, a laid down area where we put all our material, and as it turns out, they overbought all this stuff, and it's been in the dirt for a year, and so now they're like, trash it, just get rid of it right now. It's your job, you're the first year apprentice, and your boss tells you to throw all of this material that's totally good, maybe a skosh dirty, in the trash, and you just do it, right? It can be an incredibly wasteful space if there aren't plans, right? And if you don't have a plan for how to mitigate that trash, if you don't have a plan how to reuse these things, how to not be wasteful, and then enforce it, then we are, by and large, contributing to climate change with all this trash.
Thank you. I can add a story here. We were talking earlier, all different construction trades are very distinct. These three here typically work on buildings, or bridges. Operating engineers, we're inside the cab of a machine, so we're not we're outside of the building, we're in our machine, and I work on road work. I do DOT work. And a lot of people, they think operating engineers have it easy because we got a cab and we're not having to move things. But my truck doesn't have air conditioning. I haven't seen a machine with air conditioning in a long time. And so what you have is the ambient heat plus the heat coming through the windshield, which is like a greenhouse effect, plus the motor and the hydraulic motor. And that's why I got 2 windows that open and that's it. But when you got the windows open, A, all that dust is sticking to your sweaty body, and so I come home just absolutely filthy. And B, construction dust is extremely dangerous. Construction dust, not only is it silica, which gets in your lungs and stays there forever, but it's also full of every kind of contaminant you can imagine that's pulverized to a size that's respirable. And so it's sort of everything that any car has dripped on the road for the last 25 years is now a particle of dust that I can breathe. And so the working conditions they're rough. It's dire. The next question I want to ask these folks is, what do you want people to know about the oppression you face on the job that gets in the way of your climate organizing? And also, what are the opportunities you see for change? Where would you like to see things headed?
We were talking about isms yesterday. I'm indigenous, two-spirit, and a woman in a male-dominated industry. And because of my cultural values, a lot of these folks that I work with, they don't understand where I come from. So when I joined my union, started going to meetings, I was hearing all these older white dudes with strong racist opinions speaking about things that had nothing to do with our work or our craft, and like gun laws and black power. And I was like, okay, what have I joined here? Like, am I in the right place? And so I realized that the only way I was going to see change within my union was to be the change. So that's why last year I ran for the executive board and I got on as a trustee. So I was like, okay, well, maybe I can take it a step further and go provincially. So I got on as a delegate. So now these issues that I face, I can bring, like, we don't have committees because my local is pretty small. Our sisters committee doesn't even really like to meet, which is unfortunate. But now I can bring these issues that I come across on site straight to the people that can make the change. So this is my way of going about it. What was the second part of your question?
Sure. Where you would like to see things headed?
Yeah. Well, first of all, coming here, thank you, Crystal, for extending the invite. This is the first time I've been able to talk with union folk and not be criticized.
That's awesome.
So I need this in Canada. So if we could all come up there, that's the direction we need to go. So when I get back home, I need to start researching, like, who can I reach out to, what can I do, where can I find the support, because it's unfortunately not coming from my brothers. So, thank you.
Well, in terms of the oppression I face on the job site, as you can probably tell, I look like most construction workers have looked in this country since the Irish started coming over in the potato famine. There's a reason why a lot of our union presidents and a lot of our bosses all have Mick or O in front of their name. But you know, that said, I mean, if you want to think about oppression, you know, a core concept is that an injury to one is an injury to all. And so the oppression that other workers are facing on the job site does actually have an impact on those of us who look like our bosses. And in the building trades, this is especially acute. You our jobs can't be outsourced. So a lot of people in the Rust Belt where I come from have faced the prospect of losing their jobs to workers overseas as the companies exploit cheap labor overseas. What we have in construction industry instead is a race to the bottom with contractors who exploit undocumented workers for the most part. Yeah. And so, the loss of once very strong union density in a lot of our industry has been predicated on this long attack that really took up steam during the 1970s with all sorts of reforms in the industry, including double-breasted companies, including the rise of project labor agreements as a way of securing our work in a way that is harder to strike, and with the trafficking of undocumented immigrants into the construction industry. So, I mean, broadly, the entire legacy of colonialism in Latin America and the continued violence, which is often funded by our tax dollars through the military-industrial complex and the CIA, the busting of environmental organizations, the busting of unions in Latin America. I mean, you want to know why there's so many Hondurans working as roofers in the Twin Cities, up there on roofs, again, dying of heat stroke, often falling off the roof, they're barely tied off, they don't get medical treatment, being trafficked. There was a coup in Honduras, and it was funded by the U.S. And these are kind of oppressions that have a real material impact on the lives of even white citizen construction workers because we're being forced into a race to the bottom. And then, talking about, pissing on us and telling us it's raining, they tell us to resent those workers. And they stoke our hatred against those workers when it's the bosses and the people in power and the military-industrial complex that is creating that situation. And it's absolutely disgusting. So we absolutely need to organize the undocumented. We absolutely need to organize workers of color. It's the only way we're going to get our union density back, and that was actually proven here in Southern California, and I think it was 1992. There was a drywall workers strike that was actually organized primarily by Hispanic drywall workers outside of the union. They had to go to the union and demand to be let in. And it was a very militant strike, and they won. And that's how that's how a large part of the drywall work in this part of the country came back to the union for some time. In terms of where I'd like to see things go, I think there's kind of two tracks that a greener transition within the building trades could go. There's one that would be much more within our existing kind of business unionist orientation. We tend to have this inertia within the building trades that we lobby for construction to happen that's in the areas that we already have, which is why we do not tend to lobby for a bunch of green construction because we haven't organized that construction. And we do tend to lobby for a bunch of the construction that we already have organized. This is a suicidal strategy because the non-union part of the green construction industry is growing and they will corner the market if we do not get our foot in the door and hitch our train to that. So we need to get that, and then once we do that, the inertia of our building trades institutional interest, of our union's institutional interest, will pursue that and continue trying to grow that. But we got to get our foot in the door and actually do it. So that's what we can do within the more business unionist, the existing framework of our industry. And then there's a much more radical vision. That would be, you actually look at the origin of the green movement worldwide, and the weird thing is, a lot of it, the terminology of environmentalism being green, is heavily influenced by the legacy of the New South Wales Building Labourers Federation. Mm-hmm. And this is an Australian union of building workers in the 1970s. Because of the way they had organized kind of the legacy of a more syndicalist era, they had a very rank and file driven union, highly democratic. The rotation of officers was very regular. They were very militant on the job site. And they had a very community-oriented kind of idea. Part of their idea, heavily influenced by both old left and new left ideology, was that workers should have the right to not have to build things that are harmful to themselves and their community.
And that I got to stop you there so we can get through the questions.
So the green bands are cool.
The green bands are cool. Yeah.
Sorry, can you just say the question again for me?
Sure. I don't know where we were either. There we go. Okay, so how do you see your climate organizing impacted by the oppression you face, and where would you like to see things headed?
Okay, well, so obviously I'm a woman, and tradeswomen, we're wildly outnumbered, right? And at first, right, when I joined the trades, I didn't think, like, I had male cousins and we were very close, so I thought, like, no big deal, right? And I didn't know, right? And that's my privilege, right? In the world, I had no idea what it was like to be so wildly outnumbered. And if you've ever experienced that loneliness, right, and just general folks don't understand me and who I am, it's a wild experience. And I was very lucky that in Local 11 there was a tradeswoman space, and I went to it to get that support, right? But often, you know, when you're with your peers who totally understand you, then you're kind of preaching to the crowd a little bit, right? So a lot of the work, like as an organization that we do, that I do, is trying to figure out how we can make allies, because let's be honest, a lot of times they don't exist yet. And so for my brothers, it's hey, like, we need you to be an ally, and we only invite people into the space if they're safe, right? And it's something that we say to other tradeswomen that we invite into the space. He's safe, right? And it's because it's dangerous, like life dangerous. Like, there are sisters who get murdered by their brothers, right? It happens. It's incredibly dangerous and scary. So that's a large part of the organizing work that I do. And then also in being a minority, right, and being a woman and a person of color, I think one of the ways in my life that I've tried to figure out how to deal with that is just being good and better, right, at everything. I'll just know all the rules, and I'll play by all of them to the T, and I'll know the rules better than you, so when you tell me I can't do something, I'm holding the rule book, I know what page it is, and I'm telling you absolutely I can do this. And I will probably still be in trouble for doing it, but at least I have the rule book behind me, right? And empowering other people with knowledge, right, is critical for our organizing and for overcoming historical oppression on the many levels, right? And it shouldn't be that hard, right? We shouldn't have to be perfect all the time. We should get to make mistakes, but it's not that way for us. And it's very dire sometimes. But where I think I see things moving forward, and like where there's so much potential specifically in the industry, is like, I will say, like, wasn't excited to vote for the guy, but like Biden's doing a lot for labor, and it's incredible, and probably the most, I don't know about the other trades, but IBEW friendly president that we have ever had, and is doing incredible work in including language that we absolutely need. Like, construction can be with climate on everything, so long as there's a job tied to it, so long as there's training tied to it, and so long as we get paid the way we need to be, right? If we don't include language for prevailing wage, right, which basically means you have to meet our rates, right? If you're not paying our rates of pay, that means that a non-union contractor can underbid the job and pay someone else much, much less. And it's unfair to them as well as it is to us, right? If that language can be added, then let's build everything. Like, let's go for it. Like, let's build all of the climate, justice, friendly, everything, right? But these are the things that we need, and if we can find a partnership for that, then we can move forward and we can do all the things.
Hell yeah. Construction people are on-time people. You want to make a meeting go well with the building trades, don't show up late. It's like a sin.
14 minutes early is 1 minute late.
Exactly. That's right. Yeah, I heard 5 minutes early is 10 minutes late. We tell the same jokes all of the time. It's still funny. I want to take some questions from you all. So could we get a show of hands? And we're going to pace it. We want to be able to catch the audio from these questions, and so Maria's going to walk around with a mic for you. So I'm just going to give everyone a minute to think so we don't hear from all the dudes right now. Happens.
Where do you want to start, Amy?
Wheels turning. Okay, hands. We can have hands now. It's okay, dudes. Yeah, dudes. Okay. How about you in the middle?
Okay. Oh, sure, yeah. Yeah, just wanted to thank everyone for a really amazing panel discussion. This question is mostly for Emmett, but of course for the whole panel. Are there rank and file? You mentioned the NSW BLF, which is of course a super inspiring example.
Can you say what that means?
The New South Wales Building Labourers Federation that implemented green bans in the 70s. So I was wondering, are there rank and file led reform movements within the construction industry? And if so, what kind of actions have they been taking? And is that a current that's being built up right now?
I can answer that in regards to the American carpenters, not so much the Canadian carpenters. I don't know what y'all are doing up there. But there are occasional kind of rank and file rebellions within our unions, largely in favor of a more militant union. We have a real ideology within at least the carpenters of being very friendly to our contractors, and our militancy is directed outward at the other contractors. So our bosses, we like the bosses that don't have contracts with us. We try to screw with them usually. And some of our members would like a more militant union. So currently within the carpenters, I would say the main pocket of rank and file resistance that hasn't been crushed, because they usually do get crushed fairly quickly, would be the Peter J. McGuire group in the Pacific Northwest, who forced the Pacific Northwest Carpenters Union into a strike last year, which the details of how that strike failed are fairly sordid, and I'm not going to go into them here for fear of potentially saying something that would not be provable. But there are details that you would be interesting to look into on that one.
I can share also at the Labor Notes Conference this year, giant gathering of labor activists. I think this year was the first year there was a building trades track there. And can someone remember how many building trades people were there? A lot. We filled a room. So increasing, perhaps. Jessica.
Oh, wait. Sorry, can I give you this?
Oh,
You can move. Yeah.
sorry.
Take your mask.
Oh, just do this? All right. Hello. This was a really great panel, so thank you so much for sharing. I learned a lot. As someone who's in my union, Minneapolis Federation of Teachers, and in general, I'm thinking about the work we need to do to get to just transition. And my question is, for any one of you, how can other unions work and build good relationships with the building trades in order to, as a united labor working class force, push through just transition, eco-justice demands, what have you?
Okay, maybe I'll just start. And I'll say maybe specifically to teachers, right? The trades want to be in schools. We want to be in schools, and we want to tell young people, come to the trades. It's hard, but it's an excellent life also, right? I think I've said it's hard a bunch of times, but also I will say that it's an incredible life to have a craft, to have a skill, to point to my own children and say, Mommy built that. And we're talking about things like the new stadium that's SoFi Stadium. I built that, right? Yeah, SoFi Stadium.
Yeah.
So specifically, if you have an opportunity to give the trades and also the apprenticeships, right, access to students, we're actively looking for those partnerships. And the rank and file want to do it, right? Many of us grew up in communities where we were maybe told college wasn't for us, but also join the military. I'm just saying. So, right, if someone had told us 10 years earlier while we were in school, this is an option for you, we would have loved and appreciated that, right? So it's just, I think if we're talking about I think maybe the building trades is a step of, like, we're not there yet at solidarity, but like first let's be in community with each other, right? So that I think is a very easy first step, is invite us to schools. We want to be there, and also, like, as an electrician, right? If you have a high school kid wondering when they're going to use some Pythagorean theorem, like, use it every day. Every day, right? And people are like real upset. They're like, when are we going to use this? Every day, right? So it's a great helper, right?
Okay. So the BC Building Trades actually does go into schools in BC, and we speak to young people and throw little workshops, and so there is a good push for youth and people of color, and basically anyone who hasn't been welcome into the trades before. There's a huge push for it right now up in Canada. So I am taking advantage of that. But yeah, having it in schools, having it recognized at a younger age, that would definitely help. We in trade school just talked, so in BC we have the ITA, the Industry Training Authority, manages our apprenticeships. And so we had to approach them about our building sciences module because it was the tiniest module in the 4 years of our apprenticeship. And it just had a bunch of little pictures and some definitions, and it was very basic, way behind the times. So we approached the ITA and we're like, listen, look at the direction our world is going in. Maybe building sciences should be more of a priority in our curriculum. So I don't know the outcome yet, but it's in motion. And what else was I going to add to that? Oh, so this net zero work that I do is not within the Carpenters Union, but it is within the BCGEU, which is the General Employees Union. And if the Carpenters Union could adopt this work and train our carpenters this renewable energy, this way of building, if we could train them up for the just transition so they're not out of a job. So like the training is available for free in your hall. Go do it and you can easily transition into this new job. Like you can lose the fear. So I think that would be pretty cool.
So a brief comment on your question. One thing I would say, or response rather, is that you go a long way with building trades workers by just being interested in what we do. A lot of the time we have these sort of like mean, I'm tired, I don't like you faces. But like in my experience, most of the building trade workers are softies. You ask them about their children or about their dog or about their garden, and they won't stop talking. And so there's safe topics of conversation. And if you know the right kind of questions you ask, and if you come to people with a degree of warmth, there's a lot of connection that can be built there. Are there any other questions? I don't know how to pick somebody.
Let Maria do it.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, right here.
Okay. Thanks so much for your candidness. And I know that I work with the building trades a lot. I do climate and strategic research for the building trades to run like climate campaigns around. I think a lot is like framed as like the consequence that the building trades have on climate emissions, and like oftentimes are like framed as opposing to climate groups. But the reality is, like, when we have to rebuild an entire economy, like that's going to take a lot of work, and that needs to be done right the first time. So like, I see like the building trades as like integral to like leading that work. But something else I study is kind of the working conditions that already exist in the climate sectors, like building retrofits or solar projects. And we see like pretty poor working conditions in distributed projects, especially within the residential sector. So I was wondering if you could talk about like, I guess, like how you see the future of like kind of work that has been like chronically ununionized. And you kind of touched on it before. It's a lot of undocumented workers with very poor working conditions.
Well, I can speak to some of the work that the North Central Regional Council of Carpenters is doing. Our union has a working relationship with CETUL, the Center of Workers United in Struggle. The acronym makes sense in Spanish. They have been doing a lot of work trying to prosecute human traffickers, with Keith Ellison leading the prosecutions. So generally speaking, that involves getting the workers a T visa, which is a visa you get if you're willing to testify against your trafficker, and then getting them into the union, and then also generally holding accountable the contractor that hired that labor broker, that subcontractor, and getting them to go union. So we've had some successes with that. I think that our approach needs to broaden beyond just the T visa approach, though. There's a lot of workers that aren't officially trafficked and aren't going to be eligible for a T visa. They're just more broadly trafficked by the geopolitical situation, not by a specific like coyote. So that's going to be a big issue. We got to organize them somehow. And I think that, again, I think we should look to the example of the 1992 drywall strike here in LA. That like the deep-rooted self-organization and self-activity of those workers was really integral to that, as well as their militancy. But yeah, I mean, if we don't organize the residential sector, if we don't organize the emerging green industries, we're going to have a climate transition that's built on the backs of human suffering.
So I'll just go ahead and say that the solution is money, right? Locally in Los Angeles, we have residential electricians, and they're wildly underpaid versus our inside wiremen, right? And if someone was like, hey, I'm looking to get into the trades, and I want to build houses and do all this stuff, I would tell them, absolutely not. It's not a living wage. Come here, right? I would never advise one of my sisters or someone I'm mentoring into that situation because it's wildly less money and there's no way that they could afford to live in the area, right? So you have to put money behind it if you want it, right? And obviously there's a housing crisis in Los Angeles and in many metropolitan areas, right? But if we can get language that specifically says that you have to have an apprentice-trained employee, you have to have prevailing wage, you have to have good paying jobs, then of course we'll organize those workers and we'll pick up those jobs and we'll do them. We want to build them, right? We also can't afford to live here, right? So we also want housing, right? But we are not going to build housing for half of what we're making. And we won't advise other people to do so, and it will continue to go non-union until the wages come up. So that's a way that we can partner, right, is organizations saying that this deserves a good paying job, right? These things that we need, that our communities need, also deserve good paying jobs to make them happen in the first place.
I can touch just briefly on the working conditions. So in construction, it's pretty gross. We use porta potties, and I don't know if you've ever used a porta potty that's used by 50 dudes in one day. in the hot, blistering sun at a certain time of the month. It's not fun. But it actually took the pandemic before we now have in our agreement, like, you have to have wash carts on our union sites so that we can have running water and flush toilets with garbage cans. And also, out of the pandemic, we got 5 sick days. So I can thank the pandemic for something.
I think we have time for one more question, maybe two.
This guy at the front has had his hand up the whole time.
All right, well, go for it. Maria's walking towards you. It's happening. Yeah.
Thank you. I just hold it. Awesome. I'm Cliff from Minnesota, from Unite Here Local 17. So I have what feels like a hard question, but one I've always wanted to ask trades workers and have never gotten the chance. It's finally my chance. Myself and some other comrades who are here who are like doing union organizing now. Also, for the last couple of years, we're fighting the Line 3 tar sands oil pipeline. And we know that in hindsight, it's like, yeah, of course the strategy would have been to spend a decade co-organizing with working class people on the, the Iron Range of Minnesota, right? Like, duh. That's not how it worked out, right? Like, we came in as allies to indigenous, radical activists who had camps up on the front lines. We're like, hey, we need people to chain themselves to bulldozers, right? We need to go literally get in your way. You know what I mean? Like, so, like, yeah, right. Like, and this is, like, my question is kind of like from the climate perspective, and then also from like literally your jobs perspective. I don't, like, there's so many questions I could ask here. It's kind of like, hey, is that cool that we do that? What's the impact on your job, right? Like, do you get a free break? Are we just making things terrible? Like, there's so many other things to ask about the nature of that kind of thing. But like, my assumption is that we're only going to see more of that into the rest of time. And is it like, you know what, this is inherently a thing that like trades and environmental chain yourself to stuff activists are never going to agree on, and like we just have to live with that? Or can you give us intel about where to go walk ourselves? Like, so I don't know, kind of whatever you want to do with that. Like, what is that? Thank you.
I have things to say, but would any of you want to start?
Well, I think obviously you know my stance on that. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
That's fine. I probably won't be working those jobs anyway, but if I somehow get desperate enough that I do, I hope you lock yourself to it. Take the day off.
I have okay, maybe not directly related, right? But one of the things I was hoping would happen, right? Because our local, who's in the room, would not simply sympathy strike with the teachers, right? And I was like, man, I wish the teachers would just show up a few hours early and picket in front, right? In front of everywhere that we were building a school, right? So maybe, bless, climate warriors, but, right, folks from the building trades have a job to do and we want to do it and get paid and go home, right? So if a strike could be organized that is in the way, right? Like, chain yourself to whatever, it feels like theatrics, but I mean, by all means. But I mean, if you could get someone else to, like, another union, anybody, right? Someone who's more sympathetic to the cause, if you could get someone else to picket, right? And organize in that way. I mean, like, even frankly, like, all these organizations have office workers. If you could get the clerical staff to strike at the same time, right, it's likely that the building trades folks may not cross a picket line.
So I think that's the end of our panel. I want to thank our panelists.